Welcome back to Science Corner. Today, I am excited to have Kenny Carter with us. For over a decade, Kenny has guided the product development and formulation process for global brands, focusing on natural products, personalized nutrition, and innovation into unique supplement delivery systems. His philosophy is to evaluate products through a scientific and practical lens with a focus on ingredient integrity, transparent dosing, and creating healthy and sustainable consumer experiences over time. Kenny, thank you so much for joining Science Corner today.
Jordan, it's a pleasure to be here. It's been awesome to see all the work that Supco's put in for the last year plus to really bring transparency to the industry, and honored to be a part of the conversation today.
Yeah, I love it, love it. Okay, so to get started, just talk to me about how you got into formulation. What kind of pulled you toward this idea of product development?
Started very young. So I remember my first intro into product development was probably whenever I was about 14 or 15. Just started playing high school football. And one of the big initiatives from our coaches was to consume more protein. And I remember taking that first protein shake. This is 25 years ago, and really difficult to get down to it. It was not a fun experience at all. So I remember me and my buddy Chad, we went into our kitchen. We had no experience cooking. We had no clue what we were doing, but we tried to basically take this protein powder and to make it into some protein bars. For some reason, we used lemon juice. I'll get into those details in another call. But I think that was my intro and curiosity to really try to forward supplement development. And my actual career started about a decade ago with a company called SFH. We had a pre-workout at the time, which was one of the only natural pre-workouts, no artificial sweeteners. Really difficult in the taste profile because of the bitterness of the amino acids. And I would go to gyms and start to educate on the process behind the product, but it was difficult to get past that hurdle of taste. So I would add a handful of ingredients transparently to the formula, and the sales for that singular product started to grow for that company. And that was my essentially pull toward product development. I started working on a handful of concepts with that group, which ultimately came to market. And yeah, it was a fun ride to get into this world formally.
Dude, I love it. So those bars that you made, did they taste good?
They did not taste good, Jordan. Yeah, I hate to say it, but yeah, it was a fun experience. You know, I took maybe 10 years off after that before my formal training, and I needed all of that time to really perfect the craft.
I love it, man. So when you look back at these products that you've built that you're proud of, tell me what separates like a well-formulated product from one that's just like purely functional?
It all comes down to science and clinical dosing. So with this group SFH, you know, where I started my formulation career, one of the real claims to fame with that company was to create the highest concentration liquid fish oil on the US market. And at the time, what we understood was that fish oil, you know, had a pharmaceutical model. You know, if you'd go to the doctor and had high triglycerides, high cholesterol, you would be prescribed fish oil. But the key there was the dose range to ultimately help to reduce those triglycerides. So to me, looking at pure science, trying to look at clinical doses to understand what is that happy point to really get a function for the customer, to me, that is first and foremost with any product that's built. And I think from the functional side, I mean, there's a lot of products out there that make the consumer feel good. And that is definitely a part of what we do as well. But I think if you can pair that science first and foremost with ingredients that really back up strong claims and create a full user experience, that's always the goal to creating the best product.
Gotcha. So when a new product idea comes across your desk, so like we want to build X, like where do you start? Where do you even begin to think about formulating products like this?
Totally. So the starting point is always the customer. No matter what brand or what project you're working on, you really want to get into the mind of the customer and try to understand why they would approach this product in a way that would ultimately impact and help with their lives. So for a majority of my career, I've worked in sports nutrition. What we're looking at is really boosting performance, first and foremost. And I think looking at all of the variables in terms of clinical dosing to build a full ranged product, while also keeping in mind that consumers are really sensitive to the taste profile of a product. We also want to create that balance between something that feels good, but also tastes good, where you want to take on a consistent basis.
And so how do you balance this concept of like what science suggests with what consumers actually want? So, what comes to my mind a lot, I just wrote on this as well, is beta alanine. We put beta alanine in a lot of pre-workouts. We know the mechanism of action doesn't necessarily work in a pre-workout, but it's in all of them. Consumers want it there. They expect it to be there. How do you deal with this tension between like the evidence, the demand, what a consumer expects, what works? Like that feels like a whole amoeba process to have to work through.
Totally. I think for better or worse, and we're definitely getting better as a society here in the US to understand supplementation more. I think customers are becoming more educated and really starting to learn about, individual ingredients and dose ranges and things like that. But I think the learning curve still has, quite a ways to go before they fully understand the science behind a product. So the balance is, again, we wanted to create an ecosystem where customers, whether they understand what they're taking or not, is built around a science platform. And having ingredients at what I call gold standard dosage to make sure that the customer is getting that experience long term is always first in our product development process if we can help it. And then the functionality, again, customers really drive demand. So if they want, gummy-based products with lower dose ingredients and they're going to take it consistently, if they feel better about doing that, we certainly try to steer the product in a direction for consumability over time. But again, it's always tied down to if we can layer the product with full dosed ingredients that actually provide some type of impact, that's the route we'll take every time.
Yeah, absolutely. And so on that note, when you're looking at a product and you're deciding like what ingredients are going to make the cut, you can only fit so much in a jar, a bottle, a gummy, a capsule. What's that thought process? What are the non-negotiables for you when you're thinking about how to like fit this like multitude of ingredients into a product?
Yeah, so my philosophy with that, and we could take a pre-workout as an example. A pre-workout helps to, increase energy levels. It helps with endurance. It helps with recovery, et cetera. And what we want to focus on is to make sure that the ingredients that help with energy are at their full clinical dose to help with that regard, period, end of story. And the way I tailor things is that I look at every ingredient range as a platform, a podium, gold, silver, and bronze. The gold level, a formulation tactic would to basically take an ingredient like citrulline in a pre-workout and bring it to its full 8 grams, which is the clinical validation to make sure that we're providing blood flow and a pump to consumers. Some brands might put in 6 grams, which is also within that clinical range, but this is what we would consider a silver medal platform, a little bit less than what you would want, not perfect. And then the bronze and under the podium is typically, ingredients that are simply underdosed, that do not perform the full benefit that's intended. And I think that is always the grading scale that I'll use early on in a project to make sure whenever we're creating everything in every package, they're at that gold standard. And if we can't fit the silvers and bronze into a full package because it becomes too expensive or too elaborate, then we save those ingredients and create other SKUs down the line to make sure that they're at their own full value.
Oh, interesting. So if you can't fit a certain amount of ingredient in a product, it seems like an indicator for you that maybe we need a new product for that altogether. Is that kind of what you're saying?
That's right. Yeah. And I think that's always the hard balance to play because you want to give the consumer a one-stop shop as much as possible. If you can build a multifaceted product, it becomes, much easier for the consumer to take long term. We're building compliance by simplifying things. But, we really want to, again, provide products that are producing some type of result. So if that means we have to make a pivot to start to build secondary products to get that full value, I would rather do it that way than just stuff things in that are slightly underdosed or really not performing what we intend them to do.
Hey, the fact that you said that 8 grams of citrulline is like a non-negotiable for a pre-workout, like I trust everything you formulate from here on out because like I constantly am seeing like 1 gram, 2 grams, 3 grams. It's like, that's not going to do anything. I think that's awesome that like that is the example you use because that resonates very, very like highly with me.
8 grams or nothing less. That's the only
right.
way we can.
So on that concept of dosing, like when you think about real world dosing, so like what actually goes into a product, that's very different than a lot of times what's used in clinical trials. So what compromises do you think are acceptable? What is not acceptable when you're trying to compare like what's working in studies and how to interpret what goes into your products?
Yeah, I think steering toward the studies more often than not is the best rule of thumb to take. So, we can look at a wide range of ingredients. And I think if you can really take single ingredients and bring them up to the full standard in the study, similar to the fish oil example, where we know they're not providing some type of, bluff type result, that it's a real, clinical result where if I would go and get my blood tested, whether it's vitamin D or whatever ingredient might be, and show some real benefit on a blood scale, to say, okay, what I'm taking at this full dose is actually working and providing a health benefit. Again, we try to steer things in that direction more often than not. But there are some background situations where, you might use a clinically branded ingredient to really drive home the claim of a product. Whereas the anchor, again, in the example of a pre-workout might be citrulline, but we might pair it with other ingredients to really drive these, claims that the customer can attract themselves to. But science first, Jordan. I mean, again, my philosophy, and I know, brands do it in a variety of different ways, is to try to anchor every single product as close to clinicals as we can to make sure the product is working.
Music to my ears. So once this formula is set, you've got all the ingredients in place, you know what you want to build, it still has to taste good. So then how do you move into that next stage of approaching flavoring and that overall sensory experience associated with the product?
Sure. So the old adage in product development is taste is king. That has always been the case. I don't see it changing anytime soon. Our goal as product developers is to create something that works. Again, that is always the priority. But the key to success is to see a customer enjoy taking the supplement on a daily basis, and then to take it over time, because we know a lot with supplementation, it's all about the consistency of use that really provides that benefit long term. Flavor is a driver of that. So we look at formulas, we bring it into the lab, and I work with flavor applicationists, flavor chemists, who are really the rock stars behind the product process. I mean, just their training and sensory, they have to be able to pick out, flavor chemicals blindly, and then put all these things together to be able to create a flavor profile for a customer. And we look at the ingredients to essentially, clear up that they're right whenever it comes to sweetness or tartness, and they're not overly bitter. But working in the lab and having this back and forth over time with the flavor chemist is one of the most important pieces to delivering something that the customers enjoy long term.
So I think the flavor piece is interesting, especially nowadays. You see cookies and cream protein powders, you see bubblegum pre-workouts. The flavoring is wild how good I think it's gotten from when I got into supplements years ago to where it is now. It is 10x in the quality and how good things are tasting these days. That's my opinion, at least.
It's incredible. And I mean, again, our protein bars 25 years ago aside, if that was the standard, it was very low. Everything has improved so much. Plant-based protein. I remember being at Expo West 7-8 years ago. And I had tried a protein, and for the first time, I was like, wow, plant-based protein can be smooth. How have they accomplished this? And now 7-8 years later, all the plant-based proteins are smooth. All the whey proteins are elaborate with flavoring. So it's so cool to see how the science has created an experience for users to want to actually use things consistently to be a better version of themselves. And I think, again, the fun part is that we're only at the beginning of how science will really impact the flavor profiles.
Yeah, I love it. As a daily user of pea protein, I'm a big fan of all the advancements in the space. I want to move on to a bit, maybe the regulatory side of this. So we've done the manufacture, we've built the blend, we've got the flavoring, and so now I would love for you to walk us through how regulatory considerations shape how your formulation decisions have to be done even earlier than people may realize.
It happens on day one. So when the product concept comes through, typically our process, as we're learning about our customer and building up the formula, about 2 to 3 weeks after the formula is built, we build out our supplement fact panel, and we would also build out all the claims that we would make for this product. From that point, it goes directly to FTC lawyers, where they review, product claims to make sure, in terms of a brand liability standpoint, there's no issue with what you're saying. But I think from a consumer standpoint, consumers are trusting of brands to do the right thing to make sure that they're giving them, the healthiest and most bioavailable product possible. So for us to have to look through, heavy metal testing and, in the case of, again, sports nutrition, looking through banned substance testing,
Mm.
Or in California, where, where I live, looking at Prop 65, there's so many different levers that could be pulled to ensure product safety. And that is done on day one from the formulation and brand standpoint. So, again, as a high priority, we don't waste time guessing in terms of when this is going to be important. It's important for consumers to be safe, and that happens immediately.
Interesting. And so you've taken these experiences across now a number of different brands, a number of different products, different lines. So how has working across a multitude of different brands and product lines really changed like how you formulate today from where you started?
Oh, it's been a fun ride. I mean, I've had the pleasure of working with sports brands, beauty brands, lifestyle brands, and the consumers throughout these portfolios are completely different. And I think the most fun that I have in product development is trying to put myself in the shoes of whatever customer we're selling a product to. I think, as a formulator, because I've worked in sports, a lot of times I get pigeonholed as, someone who's only interested in pre-workouts. But some of the coolest products I've built are around immunity, around beauty, and understanding, what the customer desires, whether it's certain ingredients that are trending in the market that they fully understand, whether it's taste profiles and the expansion of a flavor portfolio across a singular product. It is getting behind the scenes, knowing what the customer, wants, and then trying to use my expertise with our flavor team and our nutrition team to basically deliver these active ingredients in a way that's really palatable long term. So it's customer driven. That's what supplementation is all about. And the more I can understand who that person is, and how they want to be healthy, that is always the key to drive our development process.
I love it. And so thinking about formulation across the board, what is like one formulation decision that you see brands constantly getting wrong throughout the industry? Like what's one thing where you're like, I wish if people could just think about this a little bit more, everything would get better?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of underdosed ingredients and then products putting too many ingredients to really try to, bulk up their label. But having a multitude of these ingredients being fluff, just really, we always say the fairy dusting or the sprinkling of ingredients. And, supplementation, nutrition is a science, it's very black and white. It's evolving. But from the knowledge that we have right now on certain ingredients, there's really no excuse not to try to push the upper limit to make sure you're getting full value from these ingredients. So to see, as I mentioned before with the podium, some brands putting 5 ingredients that are not even on the podium into a singular product and making elaborate claims on that is always something that does not sit well with me. I really wish we could be a little bit more direct in terms of our dose ranges. And then, I'm sure you agree, proprietary blends, there's no need to hide behind, labels. The customer is smart enough to make decisions. If they want to research a product fully, they should have every right to do that. So, having really transparent ingredient dosage on labels, it's a must. I hope, the industry as a whole, we get better over the next few years in doing that.
You use the term fairy dusting there. Can you define that if we have people who maybe don't quite understand what that means in a product?
Totally. So fairy dusting would be, if there's a clinical dosing around turmeric at 500 milligrams to, decrease joint health. But I know the consumer is aware of turmeric, most people are. And I decide to leverage their knowledge and only put 50 milligrams, 10% of the active dose, because the consumer feels if I'm getting this, it must be good for me at any dose range. That's fairy dusting. And, what you see more often than not is examples of brands who are doing this with, multiple ingredients at one time. They have a very, very long list of ingredients. It looks healthy, but on the surface, and then in reality, it's 2 completely different stories.
I feel that way too. When I see these ingredient lists that are maybe like 20, 30 nutrients or ingredients long in a pill or a powder, I'm like, how could you have enough of any of that to actually be effective? Maybe there is, but I agree on that front. Like, and one thing that I think worth pointing out is that we have to list ingredients in order of the amount that they're in the actual bottle. like by rule. And so I think it's important for people to just remember that whatever that is on the top of that label is also the most of that ingredient compared to the others that happen to be in that list. And so I think when it comes to fairy dusting, if the thing that you want is the last thing on that list, there's probably not enough of it in there to actually make a difference for what you're looking for.
Totally, and it's interesting, actually, this week. So I formulated a product for a company, ProBio, which is kind of a do-everything multivitamin specifically for pro athletes. And as a marketing exercise, a lot of times brands will compare in this powdered format. We have all these great nutrients, and they replace 14 capsules or 20 capsules or whatever it might be. And the capsules are not enough as a descriptor. What we're doing is actually showing these 14 capsules, but looking at other brands where the capsules are only, 10% full or 30% full. And if you kind of understand that you're taking these fairy dust ingredients over time and not getting that full value, then you take a product that actually works. It's hard to go back to that fairy dusting. So that's always our goal.
Yeah, I think that's great. So how do you think about, so there's tons of new ingredients popping up in the supplement space all the time. We see it on Supco. I think a good example I see happening right now is like beef organs, like these are like, they're all over the place right now. Urolithin A, I think, is another zeitgeisty good example of one that has a lot of potential, but maybe doesn't have quite the clinical data behind it yet. How do you personally evaluate new or these emerging ingredients that maybe don't have the deep clinical history when you're thinking about your formulation practices?
I approach them typically with a high degree of skepticism. I think, some of the things we've already talked on this call about were creatine, fish oil, citrulline, beta alanine. Sports nutrition as a whole, supplementation does not change over time as much as we think it does. The ingredients that have worked for a really, really long time typically just get recycled. I think this creatine boom, it's been around for 40 plus years. It's always been effective in terms of building muscle and helping with brain health. But now new customers are realizing this and gravitating toward the ingredient. So I think kind of stapling back to the ingredients that we know are effective, and in product development, trying to bring those to the forefront more often than not, is the way I like to proceed with things. And then I would say, once a year, I get maybe 2 or 3 new ingredients that I'm really impressed with their clinicals, whether it's ingredients that, can be paired with other really, impactful actives, or things that stand alone, just based on the breadth of the clinical dosing that they do, or clinical trials. I love to see studies that have more than 4 participants. That's always the key. So I think looking at, nutrition on the whole and see how the studies were conducted, and then also, understanding taste profiles of some of these, Ayurvedic or, herbal ingredients are always key as well.
Interesting. So full circle here, from concept to finished product on the shelf, what part of the formulation process do you think that consumers most underestimate, whether it's the complexity, the detail, anything that goes into it?
I think if customers would understand the process, if we're only talking about products that are flavored, what goes into the science of flavoring a product, to me, is an art form, and it's such a beautiful thing. I'm a product developer. So whenever I go into a lab, I'm able to direct the flavorist to create flavor profiles that I know are going to be on brand for the consumers that we're in front of. Some people want natural ingredients, some people don't care as much, but my goal is to, make them happy. The flavor scientists are freaks of nature in terms of what they're able to do. I remember going in the flavor lab the first time, and they basically give you sticks of different scents, and one is cardamom, and one is cinnamon, and one is, X, Y, and Z. And you smell all these individually, and at the end of the trial, they put all the sticks together, and you smell it, and it smells just like Coca-Cola. This is what the flavor applicationists are doing. They're taking all of these, detailed natural flavor chemicals and somehow, bringing them into a place where we can make a decision if we want a tart cherry, if we want a sweet cherry. They are the magic behind the process that drives, consistent use from consumers because products taste good. They're key. And you know what? It's the most fun as well.
I can see that. I want to have that experience one day of like going through the lab and smelling that. I hope one day if there's any flavors out there, invite me to come do this because I want to come do that. Okay, Kenny, this has been great. To close up, I want to hear from you. What is one supplement that you would take no matter what, your absolute non-negotiable? And what is one supplement that you think is flying under the radar that deserves more attention?
Totally. So this question probably for the last 10 years, 20 years for me would have been fish oil. But the pivot recently is to creatine.
Okay.
And creatine is so impactful in terms of the way it works in the body, whether you're looking to build strength, if you're looking to recover faster from workout, the cognitive, claims and, claims upon sleep deprivation that we're recently seeing are so impactful. And I think with with creatine is that the safety, record of this ingredient is so key where you can now, take it long-term and have no issue. Creatine is the most important thing. I would take it on that desert island and definitely use it every day for survival because I think the impacts are just so broad and so clear-cut in terms of the science.
Awesome. Love it. And then that one flying under the radar you wish more people knew about.
An ingredient, man, I hate to disclose all my secrets, Jordan, but I'll do it. I am really loving the benefits of sage. So sage as an herbal ingredient and as an experiential ingredient to really help focus and cognition. I think what we're seeing, now more than ever is an over-caffeinated population. People are consuming energy drinks and coffee and tea, and you're guilty as charged there too. Yeah. So it's just one of those things where caffeine, it works, and it works to a fault because then we overuse. So finding other ingredients that actually provide some type of experience where, you're not stimulated, but really feel a benefit whenever it comes to, pure focus in an activity and really being in the zone. Sage is the secret ingredient. And, again, I've sat on this one for years, Jordan, but I'm giving it to you. If people are using sage and experience it for the first time, I think they're going to see a real impact, especially if they're starting to transition off of stimulants and caffeine.
I love it, man. Kenny Carter, thank you for joining Science Corner. This has been a pleasure. Thank you for talking about formulation, your background, your experience. I think this has been great.
It's great to be with you. Thank you there.